Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mental Health Matters with your host, Dr. Matt Gloviak. My hope is that you're staying well and healthy during these difficult times of the COVID-19 pandemic. Fortunately, have your guest, Vanessa Cook, returning for the second episode, where we'll continue to talk about Black Lives Matter movement, as well as how to be an ally with the Black community. Vanessa, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I really had a great conversation with you here last time, and I want to thank you for everything that you had to share. Some really insightful points, and I hope that the viewers really able to let that resonate, think about it, and perhaps do some additional reflection. Now, I know for a lot of people with everything that's going on, you're kind of feeling like perhaps the finger's pointed at them, doing something wrong. Am I an ignorant person? Am I racist? What's wrong with the way that I see the world, so on and so forth. So we see out there plenty of people who take a look on social media, regular media, everyday conversations. More and more people are tuning in to different, like racial trauma podcasts. People are reading different books on, racism, white privilege, white fragility, watching all these different documentaries on Netflix, Hulu, so on and so forth. Really trying to get educated on what's going on. But at the same time, too, there's a lot of resistance because when somebody feels as though they could be racist, and that's a pretty deep, dark, dirty thing, kind of something that we want to have very far removed from who we are. We don't see ourselves as being this. However, in the blanket of ignorance, I think there are a lot of things when people really take the look at it that could kind of look like racism right then and there. And especially in this day and age with so much that's out there, we can't use ignorance as an excuse to go on and live a life where we have the wool pulled over our eyes, if you will, to do things that are discriminatory to other people. Or even in today's day and age, you might not see quite as much of the blatant racist attacks. I know we see police brutality and whatnot on TV that gets a lot of publicity. But, the everyday type of racism that we're seeing has been kind of demoted down to a microaggression. A microaggression being those little statements that come across as something positive, but are actually quite derogatory in nature. Like saying like, oh, you're a very educated person. Something like that. Like where does that come from? Why do we do that? Like what's going on with these comments? So today one of the things that we're going to talk about is really how to be an ally with the Black community. Vanessa, what are your thoughts?
I've
Just
had,
throw it on you.
yeah,
What are your thoughts?
I've had quite a few experiences with those type of comments, and it's and it's very interesting. I remember going to college. Affirmative action, man, that was something that I struggled with because I thought it did nothing but harm the Black community because it made people feel like that's the only way we could do anything was by having programs like affirmative action. And and this is just one of many stories, but I remember going, I was in college and my mom wanted me to go to the financial aid office and kind of check in. And the lady said, well, since you, the financial aid advisor said, since you came in through a special program, and I said, what special program are you talking about? Like, I had went to a selective enrollment high school that I had to test into in Chicago. So I had like a 30 ACT score, pretty high score.
It's excellent.
And I said, I don't know what you mean. She was like, well, you didn't come through this special program? No. And she said, well, what's your ID number? Because, and she asked me, well, what did you get at 30? She's like, are you sure? I'm positive, that I got a 30 on the ACT. Like, I should know I got plenty of scholarships and offers for it. And then she was like, oh, well, I'm just shocked because you got in this way. And it's like one of those things where you're pretty smart for a Black girl, or you're pretty for a Black girl, or those comments for a Black girl. And it just reminds you that some people still like stereotype your entire race as being ignorant or appearing to be certain things. So it's definitely a struggle. You would think that, I'm fairly young, and you would think that in my age group, these comments still wouldn't happen, but they do. And I just think, like I said before, that kind of comes from what people have been taught and not what they've been exposed to.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, these microaggressions, they do hurt and they happen all the time. And for some people, recognizing that they're doing it, for some, maybe not so much. But as you were saying right here, the bottom line is that, by making a statement like that to me and acting surprised, it's like, oh, well, I'm the exception to the stereotype. So now you're seeing the
Right.
entire black
Yeah.
community, and the only way they can get in is affirmative action. They can't possibly be smart. And then you come in with your 30 ACT. Oh,
Like you
you
got
got a
that?
30 on an
Yeah,
ACT,
yeah.
and these are the types of things
Right.
that happen every single day. And people don't really realize it when you're not having to personally face it. Is that day after day after day, this starts to become a daily hassle. And when that
Yeah.
happens, you're just always this slight sense of agitation that grows and grows and grows. It becomes more stressful and more stressful, and then more catastrophic things start to happen. And that's really when the ground starts to fall out, so to speak.
Yeah, and it becomes a burden, like, even with my father, he had his BMW and him saying like we weren't allowed to drive it because we're more likely to get pulled over. They won't
Hmm.
believe it's his car and things like that. And then convincing him to drive it, and then we're pulled over. And now we have to go through this hassle of, and him and staying in a very nice neighborhood, this extra additional hassle of, that this, are you sure this is your father's car? Like, I'm almost positive. And I know a lot of people would say, well, he was just doing his job. And I think when we make those comments, we're not getting to the truth of the matter. Because I know I have a lot of friends from different cultures, and I would ask them, have you ever gotten pulled over in your parents' BMW or Range Rover or whatnot?
Hmm.
No, that happened to you? And and if I'm not speeding and if there's no tail light out, by you kind of making a reason why it was appropriate, it's almost like you're not trying to come to terms with, just because you're not racist does not mean other people in society are not.
Hmm.
And if you're a true ally, you need to check the people who are.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's going to be an important part, exactly of what we're doing here right now. And again, I know last episode we talked a lot about beliefs and values and how those can really impact the way that we see the world. And I know we framed it from the perspective of a black individual growing up and seeing all the discrimination that's going on, police brutality, and so on. But also the beliefs and values that you get as growing up as a white person and, taking a look at the community and what's being shown on TV is, crime, poverty, this type of stuff going on. So then when you do actually meet somebody, and especially if you didn't grow up in a diverse community, and it's like, I see you, oh, 30 on your ACT, wow.
Yeah.
Something's got to
But I'm
change with that.
different. That's that's what I hear.
Your
I've
exception.
heard a lot. I'm an exception to that.
But that type of thing right there, I mean, that type of comment is completely inappropriate,
Mhm.
on so many levels, like we were discussing before. Now, I know a really hot topic, and again, this is one that I, acknowledge fully, wholeheartedly acknowledge. Being an individual grows up colorblind. I see everybody the same. I don't see color, I don't see religion, I don't see any other type of demographic that's going on. With it, treat all people as equals, treat
Mhm.
people fairly, and that's the way I'm going to look at it. But sometimes when we have that conversation, people talk about color blindness and what it is, some can get very offended by it.
Mhm.
So on one hand, we think this is the way that we should do it, this is the correct way to see the world. On the other, it's still offensive. Do you have
Mhm.
any insight as to why it could be offensive?
I I think with color blindness, you may not be acknowledging someone's culture, and culture is very important to people, whether they're Black, Irish, you know, yeah, St. Patty's Day, like that's important to
Hmm.
people. Their culture is important to them. So I think it's dishonest to say you're colorblind. When you look at me, you see a Black person. When I look at you, I see a white person.
Fair enough.
It's your second thought that counts. That's truly what it is. And people want honesty from other people. You know, you see when you look at me, you see a Black person, but it's your second thought. Either you're scared of me or you're like, oh, it's just a Black person. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So I think that when people say that, it kind of takes other people aback because we all want honesty from each other, and it's okay to acknowledge that you have a Black best friend and you love their culture and you love their food. We do eat different types of food. You eat different types of food, and we learn from each other. And when we truly become friends and form bonds, it's a beautiful thing. to go to your Thanksgiving, and you come to my Thanksgiving and know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes when people can say those comments and leave it at that, like, oh, there's not racism because I'm colorblind,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and we want. I think a lot of people are looking for more. Like if you have black friends and Hispanic friends, you march with those friends and you support them through what they're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
because your stories from your grandparents were probably lovely stories, but from your black friend, my grandmother went through segregation.
Mm-hmm.
So the stories I heard were not
A
as,
lot different.
you know,
Much
were not
different.
as friendly. They were sad, because you're looking at this person that has raised you and you love them, and to see that they've never done anything to anyone, but they were treated so badly that it affects you. So when your friend is kind of like, oh, I love you, we're the same. There's no difference between us. There's a difference, and embrace it, and embrace it and get to know each other in that way, and support them through that that mental thing that's in the back of their mind. Even as a 30-year-old, those stories still replay in my mind.
Absolutely.
Those experiences still replay in
Well,
my
they shape
mind.
your perspective of the
Yeah.
world, and I absolutely love how eloquently and tactfully you really just put that into perspective for everybody. And that's one of the things too when we talk about mental health and the way the brain functions. I mean, all of us have implicit bias. We immediately notice change. I mean, it's a defense mechanism. That's how we go about the world. We see things that are good, we see things that are bad. A lot of that is primed, historically, throughout all the years since the ancient caveman times. We know the big spider is bad, the big bear could eat you, don't go off a cliff. But then, we take a look at society and everything that we've been taught to believe. And I know we've talked a lot about media and what we read in the history books and so on and so forth. So all that is shaping our perspective of the world. And whether or not you want to consciously acknowledge that you see something or not, the reality is that it's there. We are primed to do that automatically, and nobody's above that, even the person who is, completely the most anti-racist person alive. All of us see that. And I appreciate how you took to the fact of, seeing color. You see me as white, I see you as black. By being colorblind, we take away from the celebration of the culture. We're not acknowledging necessarily, your dress, your cuisine, the music you listen to, the religion, all those different types of things. But on the other end as well, I also see that when we don't see the color, that we're also taking away from your experience of the hardships, the trials and the tribulations that you've gone through. And it makes it a lot easier for me to say, okay, well, you're like me, so now I don't see it, and let's continue moving on from where we are.
Yeah, it's and I think that people do that because they think it's the right thing to do, is to say, I love you just the way you are, and I don't see your color. But I think it's even more appreciative for you to celebrate the differences between among your friends per se, and I've and by me having the opportunity to have friends that are Asian, Hispanic, white, black, I learned so much as a teenager, and I meet people as adults, and the difference between just how we view others and the comments we make. You can tell my growth with different cultures has affected my perspective on different things, as far as like the people who only grew up around like their own culture. Um, so I celebrate diversity, and I'm not colorblind at all.
Well,
Like, I mean,
so what are some ways that we can go about really flipping the conversation? So, on the one hand, being colorblind, to a great extent, I think that most of the people who do take that perspective, I think, are very well intended. Like
yeah,
very
yeah,
well
for sure,
intended.
for sure.
And definitely with that being said, that's a lot better than, being the person flipping around microaggressions, being blatantly racist, so on and so forth. Definitely better. But how, especially for those individuals who believe for so long, I see the world the right way, I really do love everybody. I do have black friends, Hispanic friends, Chinese friends. How do we flip the conversation to like rise above the color blindness?
You would be shocked with how many people have, I was talking to a friend of mine, how many people have actually asked you that question to start the conversation.
It's an important question.
So one of my friends, the question she was asked was, have you ever had a racist experience from a longtime friend of like 20 years and of a different race? And she said, oh, you mean when have I had a racist experience? And she's like, oh, well, you couldn't have had it because you're such an awesome person. Kind of assuming like since she was her friend and she had such diverse friends that when she went out into the world, she didn't experience certain things. So that was a conversation started for them, and she was able to tell her different experiences. She was very shocked. But if she had not opened that conversation up, she would have gone on to say, we're friends, we're different races, and it's all good. But then she was able to see the trauma her friend had experienced and kind of support her through that. That's not something that people just openly tell. I don't go around telling people every like racial or traumatic experience that I've had. So people kind of assume I haven't. But if that's not, if it's not brought up in conversation, you would assume like, oh, you have a diverse group of friends, you're lovely. Nobody could have ever done anything racist to you, and it's just untrue because I travel. And
So going and making those assumptions, it's very
yeah.
problematic, to go ahead and have those assumptions, and I think it was really great, like you said, this is how we opened up the conversation, and like we were stating earlier, it is important to start getting comfortable having these uncomfortable conversations.
Very
I
uncomfortable.
was watching a show the other day, and this guy was with somebody who was from a different nationality. I think I was watching Schitt's Creek, and he was making a comment about the Jewish population. The other gentleman, the father on the show, I think Eugene Levy is his name, is Jewish, and the guy he's like, and he wouldn't say Jewish in a regular conversation, and then the guy's like, just say it, I'm Jewish, and he's like, oh, I thought like saying Jewish was like saying like the F word. And he's like, okay, that's my nationality. I'm Jewish. Don't say anything derogatory about me. But, being able to have these types of conversations, you're black, I'm white. That's not derogatory. That's not us saying anything offensive to one another. But really digging in deep and being able to celebrate, the successes had, being able to celebrate the culture, also talk about some of the bad things and so on and so forth. Because one of the biggest things and points I really try to get across, whether it's with my clients in class and so on, is that remember, silence is passive acceptance. So you see all this nasty, bad stuff going on in the world around you, and you're just sitting there silent. You're not doing anything. It's exacerbating the issue just like anything else. And that's really how the people in power, the ones with a lot of money, the ones with a lot of political power, the ones who have much better TV shows than this one, here, a lot of influence over people, are really able to exercise that because they know, okay, the few of us can really speak for the masses, and the masses aren't going to band together to be able to make any type of difference. So let's just keep going on. We have to speak up.
Yeah, I think for allies, it's important to. I feel like it's accepted more if it's of, someone of your own race. I've had conversations with people, and they've reached out to me, which I think is great that they feel comfortable enough to say, Vanessa, I was having a conversation with a friend, and I was trying to get them to kind of understand certain things about white privileges and things like that. And this friend was not receptive to it. And, I'm really trying my best to kind of make examples of like certain situations where they understand that, this was a privilege because of history and things like that. And I think that's where it starts, right? I think that's where it starts, where it's much more receptive, from our perspective. When we kind of speak on it, it's like complaining, right? I wish you guys would stop talking about this. Like, slavery ended a long time ago. You can vote now. You can do this now. Civil rights was a movement, was not given to us. So it's not like anybody's ever been comfortable with us being equal, right?
Well, and even take a look at incarceration. You don't get the right to vote. So again, that takes away the population's ability to have a voice.
So let that resonate. Civil rights was a movement, right? That's not something people wanted us to have. And so from our perspective, it's still like, you guys come. Oh, now you want to vote. Now you want to do this. Like it's just the continuing of complaining. Now you don't. Now you don't want to get shot at a stop police stop. So I think when it comes from other people, it's a little more receptive because if you're like, I just want to share with you, what I've learned through my experience, and let's break the cycle. I don't want us to no longer teach our children the cycle of, you know, categorizing people by their race or commenting on who's lazy or who uses government assistance, because if everybody uses government assistance. But if you watch certain channels, they would have you believe only minorities
Oh,
use government
absolutely.
assistance. But if you're like me, a lot of people, I know plenty of people from all races that use these type of things. But if you're only exposed to what's given to you and you pass that on for generations, that's the problem we have. So as an ally, you have to kind of stop it. You have to stop that generational, like saying of like, this is what this group of people are about, you know?
And that's a big part of it. And I think, as well, people need to understand with white privilege, really what white privilege is defined as is an unearned privilege that you've acquired through, history. Again, being the population that's been primarily dominant, well, we've been dominant throughout the entire time, came through. We had the, genocide of the Native Americans, and we instilled slavery, just did all this stuff, and then we built this nation. And, so through years and years and years of that, with more white people coming to power, building nicer communities, being leaders, so on and so forth, it really does put that population in a huge advantage. Now, we also go ahead and we talk about white guilt. So I know with a lot of white folks, and again, I'll acknowledge myself included, especially as I was learning about this stuff, I'm like, white privilege, what privileges do I have? I've worked really hard throughout my life. My dad
Yeah.
worked hard for me to grow up in Bolingbrook.
Yeah.
I earned a PhD working 18 hours a day to get there. How am I privileged?
Right,
But the
yeah.
reality is, again, that's the way the society is set up. Like you really are privileged. Now, there's all sorts of privileges, and you can be a person from any culture who grows up in a monetary privilege. Your dad's a multi-billionaire and he's a black man. Okay, well, you did get that privilege.
Yeah,
But
for
what we're
sure.
trying to say is you need to acknowledge the white privilege for what it is. Again, like I stated in the last episode, statistically, the black population is 13.4%. We need to do a lot more to be helping people out. And the point to white privilege and learning about it isn't so that you feel guilty, you feel bad
No,
about yourself.
no.
It's not calling you a racist. We're not hoping that you don't sleep at night or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be an examination of really, okay, these are the advantages that we're given. And you were given advantages that likely won't be taken away anytime soon. Okay, you don't have to feel guilty about it. But the one thing you really need to do is some introspection and really realize, where these advantages are, how people are disadvantaged, and what you can do to be an ally. And I think that's another part where the message is missed by a lot of people, because immediately, white privilege, what are you saying about me? But that's not what it is. Just like how Black Lives Matter isn't saying only Black Lives Matter. Again, we really need to get educated on these different topics to understand them. As we understand them better and acknowledge them, we can go and do the work we need to do.
For sure. And I sense that too. I sense the uncomfortableness. Um, and like I said, I'm a person that has a lot of conversations with different people, and I definitely saw like it's almost like don't blame us for things that our ancestors did. And I want people to understand that I don't think that's what people are trying to do. But the first step I think is like for change is to acknowledge certain things,
Absolutely.
and we can't move forward if we keep pretending like certain things aren't in place. Like I said, as a teenager, if a white teenager makes a mistake and he like steals a candy bar, it's like, okay, we're gonna call your mom to come pick you up. You go back to school, you go off to college, you be a doctor. But if the black kid steals a candy bar, so that's like a class something felony, and now your life is done. So that's not a monetary privilege, but it's the privilege of like the system they see you differently in certain ways. And it ultimately leads to people staying in their same positions of like poverty and things of that sort. But yes, we all can work hard to get to certain levels in life. You and I both have done so. But that's one thing that always has stuck out to me is those differences.
Absolutely.
And like the resources that are available, um, the incarceration issues that we have, and,
That's
and
one that people, viewers, please do highly educate yourself on the
yeah.
incarceration issue. It's quite disturbing. Quite disturbing, to say
Yeah,
the least.
so, and as you know, I have a cousin that was wrongfully incarcerated for 20 years. And you don't just get 20 years of your life back.
No.
And so, if we continue to say there's no such thing as white privilege, um, you know, do things for yourself, then we don't break this cycle of, certain things.
Well, and I even heard like another concept too, with white privilege. So, really great. So we're talking about being an ally. First and foremost, have a voice. Speak up, speak out what's going on. Make sure that you examine, your white privilege and the things that you've got going on. Really take a look at your implicit bias and, what that looks like, where it stems from, and so on. Consider, what am I doing to contribute to the cause versus contribute to the problem. All these types of things are going to be really important to that conversation. Also, but like just really taking a look here as well as you're trying to evolve and just become a better person with all of this. Here, just really, taking that moment, take a step back, just really educate yourself on the realities of what is happening out there.
And ask your friends, like if you truly have a diverse group of friends, has this been a conversation that has come up because it's so uncomfortable as we talked
Mm-hmm.
about? It's super uncomfortable. But if you kind of don't go there, it won't get. And you may have a friend that's like, yeah, this is what I need you to do, and this is what my story is, and and that's how we'll move forward. And I said, and also educating our children, exposing our children. I was in a town when I was student teaching, and the child had never seen a black person, and asked me if I had colored my skin with like a crayon, and this was in like 2010. So it's alarming. So, but I didn't fault the child because it was his exposure.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of just spoke with the parent, like, he had a lot of questions about my race, and this is a conversation starter you may want to. And then that mom said, you know what, it's true. We don't have any minorities in our town. And I'm going to make an effort to take him to Chicago and expose him to different people. So that was not a bad situation. It's just he had lots of questions, and his mother made an honest effort to to correct certain
Well, and
things, and that's all
understandably
we
so.
can do. Yeah.
Understandably so, and continuing to, like part of the conversation. So now, educating yourself and everything that's going on, but actually, using, especially, being a white individual, using your white privilege to be able to stand up for, the black community. And like you were saying earlier, sometimes, we can talk and talk and talk, and people are like, oh, I just don't want to hear another black person saying this again, get over it, move on.
Yeah.
However, if a white person stands up there and utilizes the white privilege for good and is like, hey, we need to help our black brothers and sisters out, we need to make a change, that can be really something that pushes forward. And I think that that's an important message for people to really understand. So instead of feeling guilty about it or feel like the finger's being pointed at you, realize that you could use this position of power for something good to really help so many lives.
And like you said, educate yourself. Like even like the war on drugs. Like the war on drugs was definitely just something that took a lot of men out of the community
That was a
for
lot of racism and discrimination there
for a bit
too.
of a reason. And now we have like a support system for methamphetamine. Well,
Hmm.
who uses meth?
Oh, I mean, they were literally planting
Right.
crack in like black communities, and
Right.
again,
Yeah.
something that we swept under the table. And this is the type of stuff that we just really,
Right.
really need to take action on. I'm happy to see it now, and I can't be more appreciative and thankful of you for coming here, spending your time, and just really providing such an insightful conversation for both of these two episodes here.
Okay.
As we conclude, any final thoughts?
No, I just hope that things get better for all of us, and I think that if we all unite, that the country could definitely go forward, and what's in the past we can learn from, and generations to come will see the changes that need to occur. For
Absolutely.
sure.
Every new day is an opportunity for change, and we each need to be the change that we want to see in the world. So, thank you, everybody, for taking the time to view this episode of Mental Health Matters. Thank you again, Vanessa, so
Thank you.
much for being on here. Please do feel free to visit our website, www.mentalhealthmattersshow.com. Visit us on Facebook. Appreciate all the likes, positive comments, so on and so forth. And also, if you'd like to be a guest on the show or have any questions, comments for me directly, please feel free to send an email to dr.mgloviak@gmail.com. Thank you and stay well.